We actually have breaking news on Capitol Hill. I want to bring in Michael Schnell. She's outside Republican Senator John Cornyn's office. Michael, I don't know what this news is. Tell us.
Yeah, so Steph, this meeting, there was supposed to be a meeting taking place this morning at 10:30 a.m. between Senator John Cornyn, the Republican from Texas, a key member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. Of course, John Cornyn is somebody who has held out his vote for Todd Blanche. He has concerns with that anti-weaponization fund and the IRS immunity settlement. John Cornyn for days has said that he wants to reopen that settlement, to kill the anti-weaponization fund on paper once and for all, and to also narrow the scope of the audit immunity given to President Trump and some folks around him. Now, this meeting, again, was set to take place at 10:30 a.m. John Cornyn yesterday said that it wouldn't happen unless Todd Blanche arrived to his office with paper in hand, ready to handle this thing once and for all. John Cornyn, a few minutes after 10:30, came out and told reporters that the meeting was no longer happening. So as of right now, John Cornyn is not in a position where he can support Todd Blanche for Attorney General. Now, of course, this is significant because the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to vote on advancing Blanche's nomination tomorrow. Based on the breakdown of the committee, if just one Republican votes no, Todd Blanche's nomination is stalled. It can't go to the Senate floor and it can't move anywhere. And it's not just Cornyn. Thom Tillis, the Republican from North Carolina, has been aligned with Cornyn in wanting the anti-weaponization fund to be killed once and for all. So John Cornyn said that Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, needs an answer on where he stands by 4 p.m. today. Cornyn telling us that that's plenty of time to still sort this out. But I asked him, Cornyn, again, has been very clear with these demands for days. So what is the holdup? He said maybe Todd Blanche and the DOJ think that he's going to roll over and drop these demands. But he said that is not going to happen. And one more thing I'll leave you with, Steph. A very interesting thing happened as Cornyn was out here talking. A group of Epstein survivors had arrived. Of course, Todd Blanche's handling of the Epstein investigation, the release of those files, has been so key in discussing his nomination process. John Cornyn wouldn't engage with those survivors when he was out here, but then the survivors entered into his office, and they are now in a waiting area in his office. Unclear if it's to talk to the senator, to talk to his staff, what that may be, but a lot of moving dynamics and moving pieces right now. But the moral of the story is Todd Blanche does not yet have enough support to become President Trump's permanent Attorney General.
Wow. What's your take, Vaughn?
John Cornyn, Thom Tillis, in the year of 2026, standing up to Donald Trump. I know Michael's been up there. I've been on the Hill over the last 10 years. And the idea that Donald Trump would somehow drive those two senators to the point where they are holding up his attorney general pick is astounding. Remember Thom Tillis last year when I was up on the Hill early and was asking Thom Tillis about Kash Patel. He was essentially working as his conduit with other Republican senators and was there fiercely defending the type of work.
John Cornyn was Kash Patel's boy?
Thom Tillis. Sorry, Thom Tillis was Kash's guy. Fast forward, Donald Trump is making his governing situation harder, and it's just hard to wrap the head around. It doesn't make sense. The president of the United States is unfocused. He's not helping himself by demanding the SAVE Act, by essentially demanding that the slush fund continues to exist, and Todd Blanche understanding that he has to play along in order to maintain and appease the president of the United States. Look, Donald Trump effectively can get Thom Tillis and John Cornyn out of the U.S. Senate in 2027, but in the meanwhile, this is the one moment that he actually has majorities in the Senate and the House. There's no guarantee that next January he will. So it just doesn't make any sense. Objectively, as a reporter, it doesn't make sense what Donald Trump is doing. He's getting in the way. And finally, in 2026, after 10 years of governance, he's pushed literally Thom Tillis and John Cornyn to the brink.
So this is the piece that as political scientists, we're scratching our heads. When a president has unified government, that means his party and the party of the House and the Senate are all in control. They usually have that 2-year window before the midterms, and they lose unified government. We go back to divided government. They try and get everything done possible because they know that once the opposing party comes into power, then everything slows down. Donald Trump is just solely disinterested in the governance process. And quite honestly, he doesn't respect a lot of these Republican senators who consistently lick his boots. So even though they're constantly doing everything that he asks for, he does the opposite just because he can. We also have to be real about the fact that, one, the president lies. constantly. And two, there are real questions about his cognitive abilities. So some of this used to seem very strategic. Now we have to wonder, is he really fully present with the magnitude
we have not heard from any medical experts that we know that the president has any
cognitive issues. Common sense would tell this man that if you have unified government, you might want to actually pass some legislation, and you should not be the hindrance to your own party. And the number of Republican senators who've bent over backwards to give this man what he wants, knowing they'll have to go back to their respective states and their respective districts to twist themselves. They're consistently contorting themselves to make sense of things that are senseless and useless, but they continuously do it. And then once they do it, the president says,
Christina, you're forgetting now they get to go home in August. And when their constituents ask them about gas prices, diesel prices, health care, education, the war in Iran, now they get to say, no. Anthony Fauci pled the fifth.
Right, exactly.
I'll just pick up on what you're saying, which is the emergence of this YOLO caucus that we're seeing in the Senate is a fascinating thing. And, in the months, interesting to see what happens here in the days ahead. But in the months ahead, I'm curious if they lean on that more. And we've seen Thom Tillis of my home state of North Carolina doing that. I think really embracing this role as a retiring senator, as somebody who can stand up to the president. And one wonders why that wasn't happening more before. But that's something I think I'm watching here going forward is how much is this sort of emblematic of the moment that we're in currently, or is it going to be something that we're going to see going to the midterms in November?
One thing, they're almost giving Susan Collins cover is one thing politically we can't ignore.
Explain.
They're taking the ire of Donald Trump. He's going to lash out at Tillis and Cornyn and Cassidy. But Susan Collins is just sort of hanging up in Maine, running for re-election, and she gets to keep quiet. She's not the one standing in the way of Donald Trump right now. They're kind of taking that fire. They're already not going to be returning to the Senate, and they're kind of taking it for her. It's kind of a fascinating subject. I don't know, at some point, will she cross the line and peep her head up, and will he take it out on her? Right now, those guys, they've already lost.
Michael, I got a two-parter. First, what comes next? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, the next few hours, Steph, are going to be critical here. As I mentioned, John Cornyn said that Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, has asked for his position where he stands by 4 p.m. today, presumably to decide whether or not to postpone tomorrow's hearing. Now, I spoke to Chuck Grassley last week, and he told me that they were not going to delay this hearing, but as John Cornyn said, he would probably rather delay it than see an embarrassing failed vote where Todd Blanche cannot move out of committee. So, again, the next few hours are going to be critical to see how John Cornyn handles this. He said he doesn't necessarily need to meet with Todd Blanche. All he needs is that piece of paper, reopening that IRS settlement that officially kills the anti-weaponization fund and narrows the scope of that audit immunity. Well, he has about 5 hours from now until 4 p.m. We'll see if there is any movement there. But this, again, is all in lead up to tomorrow's Senate Judiciary Committee vote, which is critical because, once again, if Todd Blanche loses just one Republican vote, his nomination is stalled and it cannot move forward.
Obviously, they are inside John Cornyn's office right now, but these Epstein survivors, for these Republicans who have to vote to confirm Todd Blanche, how much is this weighing on them? These survivors are not going away, and it matters to the American people.
Yeah, this has been a recurring story. Of course, we're actually told that these Epstein survivors who are right now in John Cornyn's office are visiting all the offices of Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee to hand deliver a copy of the Epstein files. This has, of course, been such a big topic when it comes to Todd Blanche, being as though he was the one who met with Ghislaine Maxwell before she had that prison transfer. According to former Attorney General Pam Bondi, who had testified before Congress, in Bondi's words, it was Todd Blanche who was overseeing the release of these documents. So the Epstein files has been critical for these lawmakers, particularly those on the Senate Judiciary Committee. You'll remember about 2 weeks ago, Todd Blanche had met with some survivors after the insistence of Thom Tillis that he would not be able to vote yes until Todd Blanche took that meeting. That meeting, of course, did not go well. The Epstein survivors saying that Blanche was not hearing them out. I saw them when they had walked out of the DOJ. They did not look pleased. So the Epstein issue has been a massive thing for these lawmakers, in addition to that anti-weaponization fund, in addition to that IRS audit immunity.
Vaughn, just talk about this, the Epstein files, because those survivors being there, these aren't Democratic lawmakers. These are not activists. These are women who survived horrible trauma and crimes committed. And Todd Blanche finds himself at the center of it. To Michael's point, you even have Pam Bondi pointing the finger-ish.
humans with undeniable stories. And I think history would show that those are the most damning and impactful political voices. They don't intend to be political voices, but whether it comes to the economy, to trade, down to being victims of rape and abuse
and they're not going away.
Trafficking, they're not going away. And that they have been outspoken, that they cut across political lines. And at some point, you can't deny those voices. And this has been the fact that Todd Blanche only met up with them for the first time this month to actually hear their stories is very difficult. And Donald Trump has made very clear that he's been dismissive of their accounts and the attempted connections to him and his own story. And Todd Blanche is the one who has chosen to put himself in the middle of this. That was a decision. He wanted to be Attorney General. He's the one that put himself in the middle of this.
Breaking news, Todd Blanche's nomination to become the next Attorney General could be in serious jeopardy right now after a meeting planned with a key Republican holdout was canceled. Senator John Cornyn, along with Senator Thom Tillis, has demanded Blanche formally sign documents reversing plans for the DOJ's so-called weaponization fund. But Cornyn says Blanche and his team failed to have written proposals ready for the meeting.
For some reason, I don't know whether it's the staff of the DOJ or who it is, but they simply, they know what they need to do, but they simply refuse to.
If it stands as it is now, right now, would you vote?
Well, I'm not prepared to vote yes.
MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell has the latest from Capitol Hill. Also joining us, MS Now contributor and managing editor for The Bulwark, Sam Stein. Michael, you just chased Todd Blanche down the halls of Congress, trying to get some answers. What did he tell you?
Nothing, Alicia. Todd Blanche, as you mentioned, walking through a Senate office building here on Capitol Hill, not responding to any questions, notably less than 24 hours before the Senate Judiciary Committee is set to hold that key vote on whether or not to move ahead with his nomination to be the permanent Attorney General. And right now, that vote does not look like it's in good shape for Todd Blanche. As you mentioned, John Cornyn, you just played him saying that at this moment, he is not a yes. He was scheduled to meet with Todd Blanche at 10:30 in the morning today, and he had said beforehand that there was a key caveat that the meeting would not take place unless Todd Blanche arrived with paper in hand, meeting the demands that Cornyn has laid out. Over the past few days, he has said he wants that IRS settlement to be reopened, to formally say that the anti-weaponization fund is dead and will not be resurrected. He also wants to narrow the scope of that audit immunity that was also included in that IRS settlement. I'm told by a DOJ official that the department sent John Cornyn a proposal yesterday, but then again, we heard from him today saying he has not received satisfactory materials from the DOJ. So this standoff continues. We could, though, get some answers at some point soon. John Cornyn said he told Chuck Grassley. Said that he was told by Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, that he needs an answer on how he feels about Blanche's nomination by 4 p.m. today, presumably so the committee can decide whether or not to go forward with that key vote yesterday. But again, as of right now, John Cornyn is not a yes, and that's the same for Thom Tillis, the Republican from North Carolina, who's also been pushing for the anti-weaponization fund to be dead once and for all and to narrow the scope of that audit immunity.
Okay, so 4 p.m. today. That means, Sam, we got less than 4 hours until Cornyn needs to let Grassley know where he is on this. I'm intrigued by the ways in which Blanche and the DOJ seem to be being too cute by half, right? The fact that Cornyn has made it very clear what he wants is this in writing that the fund is in fact dead. First, they offered the possibility of legislation and that Todd Blanche would write the quote unquote technical language that would go into that legislation. Now there's this reporting from Michael about the possibility of a DOJ proposal. None of it seems to be satisfying what it is that Cornyn and Tillis actually want, which is confirmation that this weaponization fund is undeniably dead.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they can provide it. I mean, obviously, we can't get into the head of Blanche, but I think more importantly, we can't get into the head of Donald Trump. And for Donald Trump, the IRS immunity obviously is a big deal. And the weaponization fund, likewise, could be used to reward his supporters, reward people who rioted on his behalf on January 6th. We don't know really what the restrictions would be on that $1.776 billion fund. And Blanche is basically telling the senators, hey, take my word for it. It's dead. It's never going to happen. You can consider the whole thing moot, but that's not satisfactory for the senators. Now, I will say, we've been in a situation many times before, where it looks like Republican senators or Republican House members are going to firmly stand up to Trump on philosophical grounds. There's a line that they say they cannot cross, and time and again, they find a way to cross it. I guess the distinction here is that we have two senators who are both out of office coming January, I should say, and they don't really have much that they have to hold on for. And yet I can't resist the temptation to believe that in the end they'll figure it out some way, somehow. It is creating some an interesting spectacle on the Hill, but usually they do find a way to resolve.
I think your suspicion is well warranted. Blanche has also faced scrutiny over his handling of the Epstein files. Ghislaine Maxwell's transfer to a minimum security facility, which Blanche has described as a Board of Prisons decision. Today you had Epstein survivors trying to talk to Cornyn directly, but they weren't able to. Take a listen.
We are dropping off books with all of the files and the leads sort of flagged for everybody to just prove that, Todd Blanche has in fact lied. So we hope that senators will take that into consideration.
Are you feeling like you're swaying senators to vote no?
I hope so. I mean, we don't ever know, right? We just hope that they do the right thing. And I think at this point, we're not political, and we never have been.
So we should note Senator Jackie Rosen is set to ask for unanimous consent on a resolution condemning a possible pardon for Maxwell, which her attorneys have been lobbying for. The resolution, it would largely be symbolic, Sam, but my understanding is it's about getting Republicans on the record on this issue.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I suppose, about this is that heading into the confirmation hearings, the conventional wisdom was that the Epstein files and the DOJ's handling of it and Blanche's very specific role in scheming in the Situation Room about how little to reveal from those files would be his undoing, that there was enough there that would make Republican senators uncomfortable because this is such a animating issue for their base and has been for a while. To a degree, it has not been the issue that has moved those Republican senators. It did come up during the hearings, but often it was Democrats who brought it up. As you can see, Blanche has been dealing with more incoming from Cornyn and Tillis with respect to the weaponization front than the Epstein files, all of which is not to say that this doesn't matter. It clearly matters both as a substantive matter, but also I think politically as well. We do focus groups here all the time at the Bulwark. And one of the things that we constantly get in these focus groups are people bringing this up, the Epstein files up, spontaneously without prompting, something that they feel like the administration has indeed been part of a cover-up or at a minimum failed to achieve the promises that they laid out prior to getting into office. So I do think this lingers. It's just not the primary factor in what might potentially trip up Blanche's confirmation.
All right, Sam, I'm going to ask you to stay with me. Michael Schnell, it is a very dynamic situation on Capitol Hill. Please come back to us with more as you have it.
Joining us now, New York Times chief White House correspondent Peter Baker, New York Times reporter covering the Department of Justice, Glenn Thrush, and MS Now political contributor and co-founder of Punchbowl News, Jake Sherman. A truly terrific group to start us off this afternoon. My thanks to all three of you for being with us. And Jake, let's start with you. You're there on the Hill. What's the very latest? The deadline is rapidly approaching. Cornyn has made his concerns clear. He doesn't like that IRS settlement. He doesn't like that slush fund, which suspected that could even be paid out to January 6th convicted felons. Are there any developments at this hour?
Not yet, but he holds all of the cards. John Cornyn does, because without him, it's going to be impossible. Without him, and it's going to be impossible to get out of judiciary, and him and Tillis voting against it would kill the nomination. So the Justice Department, the Trump administration, has to decide effectively whether they want Todd Blanche to be Attorney General, because there's no convincing these two, both of whom, of course, saw their political careers cut shorter and up here on the Hill because of Donald Trump. And this is, whether they mean it or not, this is payback. I mean, that's just what it is. I do think that at the end of the day, Todd Blanche, I feel like a broken record, but I do think he'll be confirmed.
I do think the Justice Department is going to give Cornyn eventually what he wants. And we'll have to see if Cornyn at that point decides whether it's enough for him or not. But I do think that at the end of the day, Cornyn is going to get what he wants. Will he get it by 4 o'clock today, which is that deadline that Chuck Grassley has set before deciding whether he's going to go forward with this committee vote tomorrow? I don't know. But listen, if they don't do this tomorrow, this is going to lay over until the Senate comes back from recess, which is like September 14th or 17th or something like that. So that's well more than a month from now. So it behooves everybody to kind of get on the ball. And I think Cornyn is stating it pretty plainly. Like, they know what I want. They should just give it to me and we can get this over with.
So the Department of Justice put out a statement, which I can read now, saying DOJ did provide a written proposal to Senator Cornyn's staff. And yesterday, following ongoing discussions with both the committee and the senator's office, we look forward to further discussions and the like. But Glenn Thrush, we heard from Senator Cornyn saying, no, I haven't gotten what I need here. So from your perspective, from the DOJ's perspective, so what is the holdup? Why is Blanche not willing, or at least not yet, to give Cornyn what he wants?
Because the White House and the Department of Justice don't care about the Senate. I mean, this is a group of people who they couldn't give a damn one way or the other. Come on, guys, let's be real here. Like, why would the White House and DOJ have signed off on this extraordinarily provocative agreement that even Republicans call a slush fund, and the IRS deal? I don't even know if we can repeat some of the things people have said about the IRS deal. Why would they have done it in the first place if it wasn't to sort of prove the already proven point that they can get anything by the Senate that they want? And the other thing I want to say here is, what Cornyn is asking for is almost laughably modest. All he wants on the IRS deal, he doesn't want to scrap the whole thing, which former IRS people and former DOJ people have described as a total abomination. He just wants, on paper, what Blanche said in a hearing, that it will not include prospective tax returns in the future or expand to other people who weren't covered in the original agreement. He's asking for basically nothing, and they're not giving it to him. Why? I would suspect, and I don't necessarily have the reporting on this to bolster it, but it jives with what other people with other situations have evolved, is that the White House and the president probably are not that into this, and they're not going to give it up until they have to. And one last point I want to make is Todd Blanche is Attorney General regardless of whether or not he gets confirmed. He's acting Attorney General. Right. And according to the law and regulations, he can stay in that position in perpetuity. This is, to harken back to my childhood, a bar mitzvah moment for him. This is him getting the acclamation that he wants. He doesn't need this to continue to do his job.
Yeah, Glenn, you just beat me to making the point here that he could stay in the acting role. And you're also right. You said total abomination. That's one of the few family-friendly descriptions we can use to describe what people have said about this deal. Peter Baker, I think they're right. Jake and Glenn are both right. White House, they don't care about the Senate. They like to stick it to the Senate when they can. But it's also because President Trump wants these things. He still wants the ability to have this slush fund, and he certainly still wants, if he can get it, some sort of IRS protections going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it matters to him. It's not just an abstract thing. He stands to avoid penalties and back taxes potentially of $100 million, according to estimates by some of our colleagues who've looked at one of the cases of disputed tax claims. If he were held liable, he'd have to pay an awful lot of money. This would get him out of that. So it's not just sort of an abstract thing for him. And it's also, I think, not, I think it's an important thing for Senator Cornyn, because the reason he doesn't want to simply let this go on the word of Todd Blanche at a hearing is he wants to be able to point to a piece of paper and say, you're not living up to what you agreed to. Let's look at what just happened. They just agreed to a $1 million payout to somebody who's convicted during the Biden administration of conspiring to prevent access to an abortion clinic. They made the argument that this fella was unfairly prosecuted. He's already pardoned by President Trump. It's an obviously ideologically fraught case. And that's the kind of thing that was, in theory, not going to happen under the abandoned $1.8 billion fund, except that it's just simply happening maybe piecemeal, one at a time. And that's suggests that from the Senate's point of view, the administration hasn't necessarily decided to back off, even though it said it did.
And Jake, President Trump just a few weeks ago pointedly did not rule out still wanting to have the weaponization fund revived. This is sort of something that he desperately cares about. Republicans on the Hill, though, you tell us, but I just can't imagine that too many of them think this is a great issue to go fight for as the midterms approach.
No, but they think that about almost everything that Trump talks about, right? They think that about the ballroom, about the arches, about the reflecting pool, about all of the stuff, the airplane, about 80% of the stuff they talk about, that Trump talks about, rather. They have one, and I don't mean to be, overly negative here, but they have but one piece of legislation that they're campaigning on, the tax extension bill from last year, and they don't even really talk about that. So, I don't think that they think any of this is helpful, of course, John. And I think, but the president is not, I think in my estimation, I'm sure Peter and Glenn would agree, the president isn't taking his rhetorical cues from Capitol Hill based on the midterm elections. I just don't think he is. And he's basically said in most public appearances when talking about the midterms that the party in power usually loses the midterms. He doesn't know why it happens, and he'd like to reverse that. But, again, I said this to you yesterday on air, John. The wins are in their faces, and a campaign run amid a war, amid high prices, high inflation, and the president taking on a bunch of pet projects in Washington, including a new golf course, a ballroom, and all these things, is not particularly helpful. No, it's not.
No, it is. Look, we've all lived in the Trump era for a long time now, but it still is remarkable how little he is doing to try to help Republicans ahead of this November. Glenn, let's shift gears a little bit. Todd Blanche, whether he is acting or permanent attorney general, just remind viewers here about what he has done so far and what the Todd Blanche tenure could look like going forward.
Okay, you're going to give me 45 minutes for this, right?
Look, we got 2 hours. Go ahead.
Well, look, Blanche has done essentially everything that Donald Trump has asked him to do. He has a reputation, I think, more temperamentally than in action for being a moderating influence. And he has dissuaded, let me start with the caveats first. He has dissuaded Trump from doing a few things. He attempted to tell Trump that indicting James Comey and Letitia James was a bad idea, and he was overruled. He seems to have successfully, at the behest of some senators, blocked a prosecution of Jerome Powell, the former Fed chairman. But during his audition period, since Pam Bondi was fired in April, he has done the infamous indictment of James Comey for positioning seashells. He has presided over this agreement. The agreement itself, Democrats have said, is a strike against him. He has greenlit all kinds of prosecutions and investigations. He has okayed the subpoenas against my newspaper and other newspapers, often on flimsy evidence, according to judges. And he has essentially pursued, with some moderating influences, Trump's vengeance and retribution campaign, while signing off on all these other agreements, as Peter pointed out, to compensate those who were purported to be, quote unquote, victims of Biden-era weaponization.
I haven't seen a single piece of writing that is responsive to what I've requested. I think they realize now that we're serious, and I think Senator Tillis is pretty much on the same page that I am. So they better get real, and there's not much time left.
If it stands as it is now, right now, would you vote
no?
no?
I'm not prepared to vote yes. Let me put it that way.
That was Senator John Cornyn earlier today. Not being prepared to vote yes is the same as a no vote. That's where he currently stands. On Todd Blanche, the Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley and another key Republican, Thom Tillis, are all meeting right now in John Cornyn's office. We're back with Mark, Director Brennan, and Lisa. Director Brennan, I'm with Mark Elias that, one, we don't hold our breath for Republicans to do the right thing. My only point earlier was that they can. They choose not to. And two, we're already there, right? I think we all, between the reelection of Donald Trump and the beginning of a second term, wondered how bad it would be and how quickly, and it was the worst it could be immediately. I spent about an hour and a half with Brian Driscoll today, and what's happened inside the FBI is the only thing that rivals what's happened inside the Department of Justice. And the only thing that rivals those two sort of political calamities is what's happened inside ODNI. And the only thing more alarming is what's happened inside the Pentagon at the Department of Defense, which has been oddly renamed the Department of War. I mean, they've turned the government upside down and on its head already. And I wonder what you make of this sort of inability to grasp that.
Well, it's not exactly a profile in courage for Senator Cornyn to show a bit of backbone on the way out the door. Like Mark, I've given up on most Republicans, finding the integrity and the decency that really should be a testament to the type of work that they should be doing, but it's not. And so therefore, I'm glad that, John Cornyn is pushing this issue. I'm hoping that others will do it as well. As we said, Todd Blanche should not be confirmed as the Attorney General of the United States, given his track record as acting and before that as deputy. But also, again, as we talked before, the position that they're putting people in these organizations. And I do say that, professionals, whether it be in ODNI or law enforcement, FBI, Department of Justice, wherever, they do have options. There are inspectors general that they can go to. There are whistleblower channels they can go to. There are members of the oversight committees that really take seriously their responsibilities. They happen to be all on the Democratic side at this time. But if individuals are being asked to do things unethical or illegal or something that puts our national security at risk and in danger, they can go there. There's also responsible members of the media that would love to be able to expose the corruption, the fraud, as well as the dangerous actions that are taking place. So the impact that this administration has had on the professionals in these various organizations and institutions, is profound, and unfortunately, I think it is lasting. And I really do wish that some more Republicans, even the ones out the door, would show a bit more courage in terms of pushing back against this administration.
Mark Elias, I feel like today we have the smoking gun evidence of the damage done by one of the chief capitulators, and that's Big Law. Because if they hadn't capitulated, paid bribes to Donald Trump and agreed to work for Boris over at Commerce or wherever else they're doing their pro bono work, then everybody targeted by Trump might have the kind of legal representation that Jim Comey does. Jim Comey knows these three things about the Secret Service carrying out warrantless surveillance that they know at the time is illegal because he has the kind of lawyers that he has in David Kelly and Pat Fitzgerald. Jim Comey will probably prevail in the judicial branch, that one leg of the stool, because he has not just good lawyers, not just great lawyers, but the best of the best. A lot of people at that caliber go work in big fancy law firms to make money, which is their right. But when their law firms capitulate to Donald Trump to save their M&A businesses, it's really hard for those best of the best lawyers to represent people like Brendan Ballou or Brian Driscoll or others who get targeted politically.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And it's part of the reason why I get so exercised about this topic every time we talk about it, because it is, of course, not just the people at the top of government who have capitulated. And I think that we need, as lawyers, myself included, we need to look at the legal profession and ask ourselves what the hell happened. I mean, how did we wind up in a situation in which the largest, most profitable law firms in America have turned out to be total cowards? In fact, worse than cowards. In many of these instances, they have not just capitulated, they've become collaborators. They are sort of in joint venture business with this administration. And this has downstream effects. I'm old enough to remember that when government employees, and I don't mean the people at the top who, could always get top-notch lawyers, but I remember, when rank-and-file White House officials or career civil servants got caught up in something and they needed lawyers, big law firms would provide pro bono or very, very reduced rate representation so that all of these people could have lawyers. None of them are doing that now. None of them are willing to do that. In fact, we just watched, I think today or yesterday, one of the largest, most prestigious law firms in New York enter an appearance on behalf of Donald Trump in a case involving, Jean Carroll. I mean, it's going the opposite direction, and the impact that is having on real people, on exactly the people that Director Brennan is concerned about, that, I don't want to seem unfeeling about, but the impact it is having is horrific. And the legal industry has not done self-reflection. The American Bar Association has not done the self-reflection it needs to do. And so I'm 100% with you.
Well, I'm not worried about their feelings because, I spent an hour and a half with Brian Driscoll today, who does this TED Talk and says, it is what it is something that people who have stopped fighting say, right? It isn't what it is. And Kevin Warsh knows who won the 2020 election. And if he can look in the mirror and feel good about himself because he gets to be this big fancy job he's always wanted, he shouldn't be so proud of himself. He couldn't tell the truth about who won the election. So good luck running the economy. I hope for all of our sake it goes well. Jay Clayton knows who won in 2020. And if he can look in the mirror, if he thinks his kids are proud of him, I hope he's right. Right? I want that for him. But I wouldn't be proud to have him as a neighbor if he couldn't say the word WON about Joe Biden in 2020. And if you are looking at an offer from one of the law firms that capitulated and you think you can do anything else at the beginning of your career, go do it. Because you are in bed with people who will not have your back if you do something hard. Because if they don't have their own backs, when Donald Trump comes knocking, not because they did something wrong, but because they did something that pissed off Donald Trump, right? They got involved in causes that are associated with things that these firms have believed in. And now, again, they work for Boris and they do pro bono work for the Commerce Department. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. And I think that the asymmetry of people not wanting to call out people at the beginning of their careers and say, you don't want to be associated with these things, is having this downstream effect of letting people say, oh, it is what it is. It isn't what it is. Like none of you have capitulated, and here we are. And it's halfway over. I think on the other side, it's going to be equally unemployable to have been a part of these abominations. So I appreciate all of you having this conversation, and thank you for listening to me vent.
Right now, Senate Republicans are trying to push through the nomination of Trump's personal attorney, Todd Blanche, to be the permanent attorney general. But a pair of outgoing Republican senators, Thom Tillis and John Cornyn, are threatening to tank the Judiciary Committee's vote on that nomination. They want Todd Blanche to agree in writing that he will not move forward with Trump's bogus court settlement, creating a slush fund on the taxpayers' dime to reward Trump's allies, like the violent insurrectionists who raided the U.S. Capitol. They also want to narrow the part of that corrupt deal that granted Trump broad immunity for ongoing IRS audits. But Todd Blanche has so far refused to agree to those conditions in writing, probably because his boss does not want him to, and he's happy to say something verbally and then go back on his promise. And those two Republican senators, at least as of now, are standing their ground. Here was John Cornyn earlier today.
We've heard from them. It's just that they refuse to commit to writing what he testified to under oath. And it's not a big ask. We're trying to help them get this solved, but they refuse to accept our help.
All of this has put Trump's allies on Capitol Hill in an incredibly awkward position as they weigh whether or not to move forward with a vote to advance Blanche's nomination. I mean, just listen to Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley dodging questions about it earlier this evening.
Mr. Chairman, will the hearing be delayed? Will the vote be delayed tomorrow?
We are working on getting a solution.
You think you'll make it?
We are working on getting a solution.
Will you guys discuss that meeting?
Will you be meeting with Mr. Blanche again today?
We are working on getting a solution.
Any commitments on a vote tomorrow at this point?
We're working on getting a solution.
That's called message discipline, I guess you could call it that. They're working on getting a solution. I don't know if you heard that. Now, earlier tonight, we learned that the DOJ has sent a response to Cornyn and Tillis to try to end the standoff, but that obviously has not satisfied the two holdouts because Republicans have now officially postponed the vote on Blanche's nomination. All of this is happening because the president and his allies have refused to give up on Trump's most toxic priorities, even when their own voters are begging them to do just that. Joining me now is Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat from California and member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
Okay, we just got news before we came on air that the Judiciary, the Justice Department sent a new response to Senators Tillis and Cornyn. Then we got news that the vote has officially been postponed. Anything we don't know that you know? And what do you make of all of this?
I don't have anything beyond that. I think it's positive. I just hope that these two senators, in particular Senator Cornyn, don't settle for too little. This settlement, this bogus settlement that came from the president essentially suing himself, waiting till he was president, then suing the IRS for $10 billion so that he could get the IRS and the DOJ to agree to some incredibly wonderful, generous terms that he, his family, their associates, their businesses, their subsidiaries, etc., would all be immune from audit examination for anything that went before the signing of that document. This is to a guy who is a known tax cheater. So hugely valuable, potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That's just part of it. The other part is the slush fund for the cop beaters. And here's the deal. They're already paying off some of the president's supporters using the judgment fund. They've already paid off Michael Flynn. They really don't need a special slush fund to do it. And I would hope these senators recognize that and that they will insist on protections against using other department funds to pay off the president's cronies. And as for that tax settlement, that should be shredded. The court has already found this was a collusive agreement, and no amount of narrowing should be able to rescue that deal.
There's no question they could go farther. I mean, they've been focused, to your point, on the IRS settlement, just really modifying the audit portion of it, which certainly is also outrageous and saves the Trump family a great deal of money. Why do you think? I mean, we have seen Epstein survivors on the Hill. That is outrageous, too. Todd Blanche's handling of that. There are a lot of things that they could pick apart. Why this? What do you make of that?
You know, it's a good question. I think the cop beater fund was just offensive to them at a different level. And the more they looked at the tax thing, the more they recognized it was some really ugly self-dealing. But that should bother them. But so, too, should the fact that Blanche and the department are using that department to go after the president's enemies to the preposterous degree of indicting James Comey over a bunch of seashells, to the dangerous degree of going after my Senate colleagues for putting out a video the president didn't like. That kind of abuse should alarm them as much as anything they've seen. And of course, we don't hear a peep from them about that.
It would be significant, obviously, if Todd Blanche didn't get through the Judiciary Committee. I don't want to. That would be significant. We don't know that that will happen yet, but as of right now, it's postponed. He would still be the Deputy Attorney General. He could still be the acting Attorney General. Trump could decide not to nominate someone to, I guess, he could choose that, I suppose. Why is it so important to block this confirmation from him being formally confirmed as the Attorney General as opposed to acting? What should people understand about that?
I think people should understand that the president has been able to engage in so much over-the-top corruption because the Senate and the House are not acting as a check on his power the way the founders contemplated. The significance of essentially defeating this high-level nominee is that the Congress is, in a way, back to doing its institutional job in rejecting purely unqualified people or people who should be disqualified for abusing the positions they already have. So it's an important statement that Congress is not willing to roll over for this president on everything. Will it matter in terms of the conduct of the department? If Blanche is given carte blanche as the acting AG, it may functionally be very similar. But I think it sends an important message, sets an important precedent, maybe emboldens the Senate to go beyond this decision and in other respects reject the insupportable.
It should feel good to play a better role in history books in moments, we should say.